Yeah, hi all. Just a quick economic update in regard to how I'm seeing things out there. We just got the Q1 GDP figures for New Zealand, which in all honesty is a hell of a long time ago, but they're getting a fair bit of attention today. Look, for the record, the economy shrank 1.6% in the quarter, which is the biggest decline in quarterly GDP we've seen since 1991. Now, to put that in perspective, the New Zealand economy was only effectively shut down for 6 days during that quarter. So that gives you a bit of an idea about what the potential economic hit could be in Q2, where we spent basically all of April at level 4, and then we've moved down to 3, 2, and we're now trading at A1. Look, technically, we're looking in the rearview mirror, but if you actually look at what we're seeing from week to week or day to day at the moment, it's hard to believe, but the New Zealand economy is actually coming out of recession. But what we're going to see within the commentary at the moment is talk about being in a recession. Now, we're seeing a lot of improvement across a whole lot of high frequency data. If you look at foot traffic, if you look at freight volumes, traffic volumes, people getting out on the road, pay mark spending data. A little bit of that spending looks to be a little bit of euphoria, relief, before a little bit of reality sort of kicks in. But we have technically turned the corner, although for a lot of firms, there's an awful long way to go before we get the level of activity anywhere back to where you can consider somewhat more normal. And I still am in the camp that returning to a more normal level of activity, i.e. the 2019 sales line, I still think that's a 2022 story as opposed to anything that's going to take place in the next 12 months. We are making incremental progress, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Look, point 2, just a bit of reality check in regard to what we've seen obviously in the past 48 hours in regard to this damn thing coming back in. To me, we just need to apply a little bit of common sense here. It was always going to come back in. And New Zealand, yes, we've got geographic advantage. We're this nice little couple of islands down in the South Pacific. But to completely exterminate this thing, it's a little bit like having a society with no crime, no law breakers. Everybody obeys the rule. Is that economic reality? The answer is no. We are always going to see a portion of society that is not law-abiding and does not play by the rules. So expect to see a little bit more of this sort of stuff. To be fair, the government's approach, the system they built up, well, they didn't really have a system, to be perfectly honest. So it's pretty easy for the rule breakers to get out there and it's come back in. And to me, it's a bit of a reminder that the scenario that I'm starting to think about at the moment, it's not just because of what's happened in New Zealand. I still think technically we're in a lot better shape than an awful lot of other countries around the globe. We're still seeing this knocking on the door, rising cases around the globe. If you look at certain states in America, Arizona, these sort of places, Brazil, India, obviously it's come back into Beijing. I think they're a little bit light on the numbers that are getting reported there. So what does that mean, bigger picture for New Zealand? Yes, technically we've turned the corner in regard to growth, though in a level sense we're well down on where we would like to be. But I'm starting to think a lot more about what's called a W-shaped cycle. And I think that'll be the 2021 story, because what we've seen over the past couple of months is that it's by and large been a domestic downturn story as we've sort of shut up shop. The global story, stripping out tourism, if you look at exports of goods, has actually been pretty damn good. And I'm just not convinced that story is going to hold up in 2021 as we start to see the global consumer, and I'm talking about the American consumer here, I think it's going to buckle, and they're going to buckle pretty severely. Point 3, just continue to see an awful lot of government money going out the door. To be fair, I think a fair bit of it's still got a little bit of confetti style approach about it, but they're still spending willy-nilly. A lot more green style projects being favoured over the grey. I'm not convinced we're going to get a productivity enhancement out of the green stuff I'd like to see a lot more grey, but there's still a lot of money that's going out the door. Just a couple of things to be aware of. Look, plaudits to the government for the money that they've stumped up for paying firms to have apprentices. I think that's a real shot in the arm. That's a real encouraging step. My fear was that some organisations were going to take an awful lot of that money and to get drip fed out into the business sector. The fact that it's going directly into the hands of the business sector, I think is really welcome in regard to getting a lot more leverage or a lot better execution in regard to making sure we see that pipeline of apprentices built around the corner. The other thing that's caught my attention at the moment is that while the government is spending an awful lot, and there's still a fair bit to go, starting to see more and more stories in regard to local government projects that are being stalled or effectively substituted with central government ones. So yes, the central government is spending pretty big, but what we're seeing on the other side is because local government authorities have really got their back up against the wall in regard to incomes down and debt's pretty high, is that they're readdressing their 10-year plan, and a lot of projects that they thought they were going to do, they're basically carving up or they're parking, and they're seeking central government money as a substitute for that. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that the government stimulus that is coming into the pipeline is not going to be as large as what we perhaps originally thought. Point 4, just quickly, I normally don't like to talk about social issues, but I don't think we could ignore this one. What's caught my attention has been the Black Lives Matter. Look, without entering into debate on racism, which I think is a problem, to me, these marches around the globe are not just about racism. I think they're telling us there's a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year story here where the gap between the haves and the have-nots has just become too wide. We see it in New Zealand. If you look at Maori unemployment versus European unemployment within the social housing stats in regard to home ownership and this sort of stuff. So I think we're starting to see a fair bit of blowback around the globe, and we're seeing that locally. Law and order is being tested, and some of this sort of stuff could turn a little bit nasty. I think about it, if you're an American investor, they're looking at putting a retail shop on Main Street of any main American city at the moment, you'd be a pretty brave person to be taking that lease, because odds are there could be something moving down the street sometime, and all of a sudden you're fit out of your shop. Well, you've got a few problems there on the other side. Our final point observation I just thought I'd talk about is Wall Street versus Main Street. What we've seen around the globe in the past month or 2 months has been one hell of a recovery across Wall Street or equities, which there's various theories in regard to what's going on. Some people put it down to the fact, well, equities are forward-looking, so the fact that the global economy technically is looking less worse, or we're starting to turn the corner. There's reasons for equities to go back up. Liquidity is abundant, and of course what we've also seen is central banks are out there throwing a kitchen sink for this thing, and the US Federal Reserve, which is the world's most biggest, powerful central bank around the globe, came out the other night, and they basically announced in fact, didn't just announce, they started to do it. They're buying corporate debt. They're providing a backstop to make sure that firms have got access to liquidity. Now, glass half full. This is about central banks deploying their armory, making sure that the financial plumbing is working. Glass half empty. When you start seeing central banks implicitly underpinning asset values, what does that do? It drives a bigger wedge between the haves and the have-nots. The big winners here have been Wall Street, the owners of capital. If you look at Main Street, the unemployment rate or job seeker benefit numbers, or what we're starting to see in regard to demand for food parcels, you've got a massive disconnect. Now, to be fair, part of this disconnect reflects one's forward-looking, whereas unemployment jobs tend to be a bit of a lagging indicator. Yeah, but I think central banks have got to be really careful at the moment, because the more they interfere in the market, the more they interfere with what's called the process of price discovery. If you're an investor out there at the moment, you're actually not quite sure what you're buying. Is it a quality asset or not, or is it just something that's been propped up artificially by this huge wad of central bank money? And if I go back and have a look at what I talked about at theme 4 in regard to Black Lives Matter, and starting to think about the social side of the ledger, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, that gap between Wall Street and Main Street at the moment, I'm just starting to find a little bit troubling in regard to where we're going to start to see the social side of the ledger pretty heavily overlap with the other side with the economic side of the ledger. So that's all from me. Catch up with you next time.